Cook Library in Waynesville, Ohio, and we will be interviewing Roy Millard, and this is October 8th, 2002. Good morning.
Morning.
We're glad to have you here for the interview. I said we'll make it as painless as possible.
Thank you.
To begin with, can you please just tell us your name again and the branch of the service that you served in and the time period that you served?
My name is Roy Millard. I was in the Army from 1943 to 1946. I was a corporal gunner in a medium tank, which is a story unto itself.
Okay, a medium tank as opposed to, I'm familiar with Sherman tanks from that era.
Sherman was the medium.
Is this the medium?
There was a light tank and a heavy tank, but the light tank was only used for reconnaissance. Medium tanks were the ones that did all the fighting. The big tank, heavy tank, was just too cumbersome and never saw any action that I know of.
Okay.
In any theater. I was a gunner.
Now, as a gunner, was this the big gun that came off the front, or were some of the smaller guns that were the armaments on it?
Okay, you have two guns. You have a 75mm cannon, and you have a 30 caliber machine gun mounted coaxially, which means they're both together. As one moves, the other moves, like that. And the idea being that I would fire the 30 caliber, which has tracer. Every fifth round has got a little red fire that comes out the back. And by watching the tracers, you get to where the target is, and then I would just click the button, and the big gun then would go exactly where the 30 caliber was. So in other words, you wouldn't be wasting your big gun.
Okay. So someone else, how many men were in a tank?
5.
Okay.
A driver, an assistant driver, or bow gunner. He had a 30 caliber also. Then a loader, the gunner, and a tank commander that stands behind me.
Okay.
And his head is up in the turret. What do you want to call it? Door. I have a periscope. I would do my sighting and firing through the periscope. Tank commander would give me a target to shoot.
Okay. And how did they give you the target? I mean, in all the movies we see, they tell you degrees and that type of thing. Is that factual? Is that how it would be given to you?
Well, like you say, it's in the movie.
Right.
In actuality, it's a target of opportunity. I'm looking for a target. The tank commander is looking for a target. And he sees one that's closer or has to be shot first, well then I'll swing over. Because all it takes is a twist of the handle. The turret goes round and round and round.
So it goes in a 360.
360 degrees, correct.
So how quick could you get the bigger gun? Is that the 30 millimeter?
No, the 30 caliber is a
30
machine gun, and 75 millimeter is the cannon.
Okay, now these were the ones that came with the great big shells, like this?
This long.
That big, okay.
Yeah.
Now how quickly,
3 inches across.
wow. Now how quickly could your loader load those? I mean, would it just hold one of those at a time?
One of those at a time. Nothing has changed in the modern tanks. It's still one shot at a time. Although we could fire so fast and so accurately that the Germans that we captured wanted to see our automatic cannon. Really, it's true. And they always wanted to be first in line to clean out a tank that had been knocked out and the bodies are still in the tank. We would have the German prisoners of war clean the tanks out. And they wanted to see the automatic cannon. What it takes is a guy that doesn't really have many brains. I'm not degrading the loader, but you have to hold your thumb over the cap or the tip. And then the tank is moving, and you only have that little hole to throw the projectile into. So if you stop to worry about hitting the tip, because if it hits, everything blows up on the inside, so we're all dead. But if you worry about that, it takes too long to try to find the hole and then ram it forward. So a smart guy that has a college degree knows that if he misses, it's all kaput. But if you take a guy who only went to the first grade, doesn't worry about that, and throws it in. If he misses, okay, nobody knows about it.
Well, is it dark inside the tank, or is there any kind of auxiliary lighting in there to see?
There's lighting.
Okay.
But like I say, as you're moving, everything is in hydraulics, and we have a, I forget the name of it now, but it keeps the gun more or less level as you're going across rough terrain.
Okay. Can you tell us a little bit about what your life was like at the time you entered the service? How old were you? Were you married, drafted, enlisted? You know, just the circumstances of you becoming involved.
I was 18. I got drafted because I had bad eyes. I tried to volunteer when the war broke out, but they wouldn't have me because I couldn't see good. I particularly wanted to be a gunner in the tail gunner in a bomber, and I have to laugh at the irony of it. I went from 200 miles an hour to a tank that only goes 2 or 3 miles an hour. But I still was a gunner. I was the best gunner in my graduating class at Fort Knox.
Is that where you did your basic training at Fort Knox?
That's correct.
Okay. And after you did your basic training, how long was it before you shipped overseas to join the battle?
There's where my story comes in.
Okay.
You want to hear the
yes,
story?
Yes, sir. You go right ahead. It's your story. Go ahead and start.
Very well. Like I said, I was the best gunner. We also had a best driver and a best mechanic. And the three of us, after everybody left, were going to stay at Fort Knox and teach all the recruits coming in how to fire or how to drive or whatever, which meant that we would have a staff sergeant rating, and I was married at the time, and my wife would come down to Fort Knox, we'd live on the base, and fight the war from there. It was, no chance of getting killed. And after a couple of days, they woke us up about 3 o'clock in the morning, verified who we were, and told us we had just volunteered for a special outfit. So they hustled us down to a train station, put us in a Pullman car all by ourselves, just the three of us. And we ended up at a railhead called Taos, Arizona. And during the trip, I think it took us 3 or 4 days, we had to be fed by a Filipino busboy who fed the passengers, but they had MPs on both ends of the cars that we couldn't have anybody to talk to or whatever. We wondered what we were getting into. So make a long story short, we arrived, they put us in a tent where there were officers, and we had to swear on the Bible that we would not reveal under penalty of death anything that we see from now on. So as it turned out, we had a secret weapon that was in contention to win the war, along with the atomic bomb that was developing in Alamogordo, New Mexico. It was a race. Once we became familiar with the secret, we knew that we were just guinea pigs or suicide group or expendable group or whatever. The secret was a light came out of the tank, generated by a couple of electrodes. But inside the gizmo, is what we called it, was mirrors, highly polished steel, magnification, and it came out of a slit about 2 inches by 36 inches, something like that. I have a picture. The idea was to blind the enemy so they could not see us. We generated from that light 13 million candle power. An officer told us that if we could prop the tank up and point it toward the moon, and there was somebody on the moon, they would see the light. Now this light came out in a V, like so. The next tank, there were these 5 tanks usually in our tactics that we did in Arizona, presented a wall of light. So the enemy was not blinded. They could see nothing but white. If they turned around, they could see the countryside or whatever. It wasn't that type of blind. Another unique, very unique thing is the ray that came out was so definite it was like the edge of a table. All right, picture this, and then the next tank. So the rays converged together, but behind it was darkness, or what we call the cloak. And you could stand in the cloak at the very peak where the lights came from 2 different tanks, reach out and take a German's helmet off and hit him on the head, or shoot them, stab them, do anything you want. They can't see. It was fantastic. It was a British invention. So you can see we could get together because it blinded for, I think the distance was 2,000 or 3,000 yards. A long distance anyhow. But just a wall of light. Fantastic. That's what we thought too. But see, like I said, it was invented by the British. The British is also the group of people that had come up with the Marquis of Queensberry boxing rules. You know, you can't hit below the belt. And that's the way they're such gentlemen. During combat time, Montgomery's forces during the afternoon would stop the war to have tea. Now, I don't mean to be degrading, but that's the way General Montgomery was. Thought it was a big morale thing. So, as you know, if you're sitting on your porch at night and a car drives by with its bright lights on, you can see as the car traverses the driver or any passenger. I mean, you can't identify who it is, but you see the person. So if you had a rifle, bango, you could shoot them. Or cannons or machine guns or whatever. But wars are not fought face to face. They cheat, according to the British. They come around on your flank. And if they're on the flank, the light doesn't bother them. They can see us very, very plainly. And then they could shoot us, or they get around behind us. Wars are not gentlemen rules. So we knew that what we were in was a suicide mission. When we got to England, or Wales rather, the colonel called us all together and said, we are no longer the 740th Special Tank Battalion. we are now going to be known as the 740th Fighting Tank Battalion. Now, remember, as they took me from Fort Knox, I was the best gunner in the graduating class. Other armored training camps were also graduating people, and the 10 battalions of us that was out in the Arizona desert took all the best people, the best gunners, the best drivers, etc., took them and became part of this big secret. When I say secret, when I got out there, there were 10 men on one path to go into Phoenix. When I say 10 men on one path, that's the way it was listed. Mm-hmm. And you better be together, because the secret was so secret that you couldn't tell anybody you want to get shot. So 10 men, picture this now, 10 men. One guy wants to go to a show. One guy wants to go skating rink. One guy wants to go to church. One guy wants to go to a house of prostitution. You had to pick your buddies. As they learned that they could trust us, they came down to, I think it was 6 to a pass, 4 to a pass, and then finally a buddy pass. The buddy system was nice, except if you got a furlough. If you had a furlough, then you had to pay the train fare for your buddy, because your buddy had to go home with you and had to sleep on the floor or whatever in your bedroom with your wife, so you don't tell your wife about it. It was,
oh, that was bad.
Yeah, but
very bad.
I don't know how things like that ended up. So, be as it may, we didn't have to use the weapon. The only time it was used was crossing the Rhine River. They had one bridge at Remagen that the Germans couldn't blow up. It fizzled out or it did something. So they were trying to float explosives in one way or another down the Rhine River to blow up that bridge, so we couldn't use it. And somebody thought about our gizmo. So they had one tank that had the gizmo on it, and they used it to light up the Rhine River. And you'd see a log or something coming down, and everybody would start shooting, and it would blow up. So then you knew that there was a guy underwater or whatever, but that's the only time it was ever used. So, approximately 15 years later, here's where the thing comes in. A group of guys got together for a reunion in Boston, and they found out that 20%, about 20% of the guys at the reunion, comparing notes, found out that about 11, 12, 13, 14 years after everything was over and done with, they started fathering deformed daughters, not sons, only daughters. It took that long for the radiation, I use the word radiation, to change our genes or hormones or something or other. Because up till then, you had boys and girls, it was okay. But after this length of time, we'll say 13 years, the daughters born were deformed in some way. I had 2 boys and then I had 2 girls. And the first girl was born in 1955. Second girl was born in 1960. There were cleft palates, lip, what do you call them, club feet. the normal disability. Mongo, mine had a growth out of her neck, as they call it, a hydroma or a hygroma, something like that. And the second girl was born with internal eczema. And both of mine had never been in the United States in over 50 years. So the doctor operated and everything was fine. The girls turned out real good. But the other guys, there was a secluded valley, like I said, it was so secret in Arizona, that nobody could get in or out. Just one path. And you take a group of men like that, about 7,500 men, and 20% of them come up with a deformity of some kind, to girls only, not to boys. It has to be done by the gizmo. All right, some nights I would be on a hill, and my buddies are attacking, and I have a 30 caliber machine gun.
Like in mock drills?
And yeah, only I would be shooting live ammunition. Everybody's inside a tank, and so the 30 caliber doesn't hurt. But I know the secret, and I'm trying to shoot a tank, and I can't. But I'm exposed to the ray, the light. The other thought was that when I would be in the tank, I would be sitting right next to this enclosure, and when the electrodes burn out, I would have to go in and replace. And again, because it's inside, maybe the radiation got me there.
So it was, the power source was not just a light bulb, it was more than that?
No. Have you ever seen these big searchlights that come from an opening?
Yes.
That type of thing.
Okay.
There's two electrodes and the current is passed through, and it's a real bright flame, if you want to use the word. And then the mirrors and magnification, whatever, I don't know, would pick it up and it would go out through this slot. See? So we don't know whether this thing got our genes from inside or from outside. A bunch of us tried to get the government to compensate us, similar to Agent Orange during the Vietnam, but to no avail. There's a side note on that. Because I had two boys, two girls, then I figured I couldn't propagate anymore. I had to stop making children because who knows what the next one would come out. So I decided to sue the government. And I went to a lawyer and I started telling him about it. And he couldn't believe it. He went and got his partner across the hall. And the two of them were in the office, and I related just everything that I've just told you. And they couldn't believe it, and they said, yes, indeed, we are going to start sending letters. I'll say about a month or 2 months after that, my lawyer was killed in a car wreck mysteriously. They couldn't figure out what happened. Why did he, like no heart attack or whatever, like he was driving. And that's the last that was ever in the paper. I waited about a month and then called the office, and they told me that the lawyer had passed away and the partner was assuming all the cases. Gave him my name, and she said, that doesn't ring a bell, I'll check the files. Checked the files and came back and told me that I'm not in there. And I gave all the newspaper articles and everything that was there. So I said, well, let me talk to the partner. So I talked to the partner. He says he never heard of me. And I started telling him about the light and all that. And he says, I don't know what you're talking about. Goodbye. So I figured whatever it was bigger than me. So I just tucked my tail between my legs and disappeared, more or less. So there you have the strangeness of the case itself. Like I was trying to expose the government to something or other, I don't know. And then the changing of our genes that would give us deformed daughters, very unusual. We had reunions in my outfit starting in 1974, which is about 30 years later, and we start comparing notes. And yes, in my own battalion, we had plenty of guys. I don't know about 20% rate, but there were a bunch of guys that had deformed daughters. So that's the end of that particular story.
Oh my. Quite a story. After this incident, did they, I'm assuming from your records here, you went to a regular battalion and they sent you into battle and were you in Germany and in a tank and I mean, the events went along as a gunner in this tank during the war?
They sent us across the Atlantic in many different ships. They would take 5 tanks, put them in one boat. The theory being that if a submarine got it, they'll only get 5 tanks.
So were you on the same boat with your tank?
Yes.
Okay. Or instead of the regular transport ships?
That's correct.
Okay.
There were 5 tanks to a platoon, 5 men per tank, and that's all it was on. Just little freighters is what we had. And we landed in Wales. And after a couple of days, lo and behold, we had to go out at night and do our tactics.
In Wales?
In Wales, Pembroke. And lo and behold, all the villagers came out and watched the crazy, bloody Yanks running around with this blooming light. Well, you had to know that there were Germans, spies, living there. They had to be. So our secret was no longer a secret. After all of this that we've been through for a year. So a couple of days after that, the colonel called us together. We're just one bastard battalion. That's what they, I mean, anybody that's not attached to a division is a bastard. He said, as of today, you are no longer known as the 740th Special Tank Battalion. You are known as the 740th Regular Fighting Battalion. In other words, goodbye Gizmo.
So at that point, did they attach you to a division?
No.
They still don't?
No.
Okay.
We had to go to France. We did not go into D-Day. We went a month later or something like that. Excuse me. And we traveled across France to Belgium, and then we had to stay in this one little town and wait for tanks to be brought up to us to go fight the war. While we were sitting there, or in this town, December 16th, the Germans decided to attack. They...
This was 44?
44. Battle of Bulge is what it started out. So they threw us in trucks, took us to an ordnance depot where you could get tanks normally. As we were nearing the depot, the guys who were in the depot were running the other way. And they said, take anything you want.
In other words, they were knocking you down to get out? Is that
they were running from the Germans.
Okay.
And we were in trucks. We had no guns, no weapons, no nothing, no tanks. So we got out of the trucks and they said, find whatever you can find. We found some tanks that were, we'll say, half operable. And so we started cannibalizing some to make some good tanks that we could fight with. Now, this is where this comes in. Here I am, I don't know, 18, 19, and you think you're invincible. You think other people get killed. You won't get killed. But I want something to fight with. So everything is covered with tarps and snow. And so we had to uncover everything and see what we could find. And all I could find was a wooden case of hand grenades. And that's what I was going to go against German tanks with. I would have done it. The reason why I hang it on the wall is because it shows every time I get a little cocky and I think I know everything about everything. This is the great thing to take to become humble. And I just look at it and then I go and correct whatever mistake I've made. And I've made plenty. But I was seriously going to fight German tanks. This would have just bounced off of them. So we were a bastard battalion. I finally got a tank that I didn't know how to fire. It was a long-range artillery piece on tracks. It was about the best way. I finally figured that if I pulled this cord, the firing pin would go forward, but I had to have the tank driver move this way or that way so the gun would be pointed where I wanted it to go. So this was a long-range artillery gun way in the rear. And we were going down the road toward the enemy, and we come across this crew that had been trained in artillery. So we swapped. And then anyhow, we fought the war, being attached to all the different divisions that were attacking in the Battle of the Bulge. The main division that we were attached to was the 82nd Airborne. And they were the best bunch of fighting men you could ever imagine. I would have given up my life to help some of those guys.
So, were you in Germany? I mean, did you?
Yeah, we went from Belgium
into Germany.
and then we eventually crossed the Rhine, which is the border, and then we had to do what they call the Ruhr, R-U-H-R, pocket, which was, we surrounded all these Germans. They said there was about 3,000, but it turned out to be about 7,000, I think. And it was bad. It wasn't a cool thing. It was as bad as the Bulge. And then we finished that up, and then we drove north, chasing them, until we met the Russians that were coming west, across the top up there of the Baltic Sea. And that's when it ended.
Can you explain for the purpose of the videotape what that Ruhr pocket was? I mean, was it an area or a battle like the Bulge or the Siegfried Line, or?
Okay. The Ruhr was, it's the name of a river, I know. It's the manufacturing area. And after the Bulge, as we pushed the Germans to the Rhine and then across on this bridge at Remagen, there were so many Germans that didn't have gas and they couldn't escape. And there were a whole bunch of about 7,000 men and equipment. And in our eagerness to attack, this was being held up. And so we went around like that, which meant that it became a pocket and they wouldn't give up. So So we had to just keep fighting until they finally all did get whatever was left.
And how was it meeting up with the Russians? Did you interact with any of those troops, or what's your opinion there?
Well, people don't know about this, but we knew that they were Russians and we knew they were coming, but they didn't know we were not German. And so they started shooting us, tank to tank. You know, not close up like this that you could see, but they should have known that by our silhouettes that this is not a German tank, it's a U.S. tank.
Yeah, a Sherman looked a lot different than a Panzer.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
A Panzer is a German word for tank. It's not a particular item.
Okay, so it's a generic.
Yeah, there was King Tigers, which is the biggest and heaviest, and then Tigers, and Panthers, along that line. So anyhow, we had our own war with the Russians, and we won.
How long did it take them to figure out?
2 days.
2 days? Oh my goodness.
But nobody knows about it. You know, it's something you don't publicize.
Right. It happens more than we realize.
Oh yeah.
So were you in occupied Germany for a while then? After the war was...
Yeah, the war was over in April, and I left there in December.
It was December of 40.
Of 45.
So you still, you said you were until 46, so you still stayed in a little longer after you got stateside?
That's correct. No.
No?
We
Or you got
landed in
discharged?
Boston, and we couldn't get to Indianapolis fast enough. So I actually, they asked us a stupid question, because it was around between Christmas and New Year's, that because New Year's is so close, do you want to stay in the Army for 2 more days and celebrate New Year's Eve in Indianapolis? Well, that's a stupid question.
So when you came home then, how was it coming home? Was it difficult to get back into the groove of civilian life, or did you just kind of fall right back into it easily?
Oh yeah, I did.
Did you?
But I was one of the jerks that you see come off the gangplank and then got down and kissed the ground.
Yeah.
I did that too.
Did you?
A bunch of us did. It was,
Good to be home.
oh yeah. I had a wife and a kid.
Did you already have a child then?
Yeah,
Okay.
and I think he was about a year old, something like that.
Where were you living?
In Detroit.
In Detroit. So you went home from Indianapolis to Detroit?
Correct.
Is that, okay. Just kind of in finishing up, would you say there were any positives that came from your military experience that you carried over into your life?
Taught my boys, be respectful, particularly of elders. And I've always said that any veteran that you will meet in later life, give him your love, your respect, your understanding. Worked out okay.
And how about negatives? There's some pretty obvious ones, but I mean personally.
Well, there must have been something psychological, because at that time my wife lived near Detroit City Airport, and more than once I would jump out of bed and go underneath the bed to hide, because the airplanes taking off or landing would sound just like, you know.
Yeah. In the aircraft.
There was one person, one German I killed, that haunted me. He had a camouflage poncho, I guess you'd call it, and he wouldn't halt. So I shot him. I took 3 shots before he fell. Then I got up there and turned him over and started searching, and he had some photographs, him and a frau and a couple of kids, and he was old, like 30. Oh, now that was old.
That's pretty old, huh?
Yeah. So I felt so guilty. He was still alive. So I went looking for a medic. And what I did, inadvertently of course, I wandered through no man's land. It was space between us and the Germans. And it was all bombed out walls and windows, just like you see in documents. And what I did is I went right through no man's land hollering, "Medic! Medic!" And any German with a rifle could have plumped me as I was going through. But the way that somebody governs things, which I could tell you a couple, I'd like to tell you another story. By the time I got a medic and I told him where I had hit him, well, then he said, forget it, he's dead. So every now and then that guy comes back while I was sleeping. And this one particular, I think it was the last time I saw him, I had a radiator in the corner of the bedroom, and the street light with the trees, the shadows on that thing made it look like that camouflage suit or cloak or whatever. Anyhow, I woke up and I had been dreaming about him, and there he was again. So I reached for my gun, and I got nothing but bare butt. So I know I'm the dead guy, and I start to move to run, and of course I'm in bed, and my wife, she said, "What's the matter? What's the matter?" I said, "Get out of here, he's going to kill us." So I run for the door, and this is classic Laurel and Hardy. She runs for the door, and we both come in the door at the same time. Whack! I knock her back, and I get out, and I'm in the hallway. I had a brother-in-law that was staying with me in the other bedroom across the hall, and he was in the Pacific against the Jap, and he was having a nightmare. And we both met each other in the hallway. We grabbed each other's throats and we're, "Bill? Roy? What are you doing here?" Oh God, we realized what happened and we went back to bed. And I haven't seen the guy since.
Your brother-in-law or the German?
The German.
Just to finish up here, since this tape is going to be around for a long time after all of us are gone, if you had to leave one final comment to the next generation about war and your experience as a veteran, what message would you leave them?
If your country asks you to go to war, go. No ifs, ands, or buts. This is your country. Right or wrong, you got to defend. So as far as Saddam Hussein, go get him. Should have got him 10 years ago. Okay?
All right. Thank you very much.
Oh, okay. Outside of actual combat, we were going down the road, and the tank commander hits me on the head and said, "You won't believe it. Take a look." So I got out of bed and looked over the turret, and alongside of us, here comes a what's that called? A sludge, where they dump the outhouses.
Honey dipper truck.
There you go. There you go. A honey dipper, but it was clean. All right, and driven by horses, and 82nd guys. Hey, hey, you know, it's cracking the whip, and we got a 30 caliber mounted on the front of this honey dipper, and 30 caliber mounted at the rear, and 4 guys in the bottom, in the middle, playing dice. Then 82nd are riding horseback, bare, along the road, and firing their rifles into the woods, trying to draw German fire. They're guts. I mean, they got guts. I saw one guy through my periscope, that the machine gun chopped him right off at the ankles, and the bones were sticking straight down, but he's still going and firing until he eventually dropped it.
Well, was he in shock or?
Yeah, you don't know when you get hit, most times.
So I just wanted to know if the Germans stopped for tea too in the afternoon.
No.
May we make copies of some of these?
Little beam come out, and